So welcome to the Power of Peer Groups, joint webinar between Taylor Business Group and Gradient MSP, looking to talk about the ominous peer group, this neat wave that kind of has taken over in the MSP space over the last, oh gosh, 10, 15 years now. It's no longer a fad. This is well established as a means of building and growing and expanding your MSP. So get to some introductions of who's joining us today. We have the man that doesn't need an introduction, Mr. Ken Patterson.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Dennis O'Connell.
Oh, we'll start with you. You're on the left of the screen. Communities and ecosystems at Taylor Business Group. Ken, why don't you say hi to people and tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi to people. As Colin mentioned, I'm Ken Patterson from I'm VP Communities and Ecosystems at Taylor Business Group. I was an MSP for longer than I care to admit, for many, many years. I sold my MSP probably now 13 years ago and started helping MSPs along the way. And before joining the dark side, I went to PAX 8 and grew their community from couple thousand to about 15,000 stock raving mad fans, and left PAX 8 very amicably and decided to come over to Taylor Business Group and help them do the same thing I did over at PAX 8, build up the community. If you haven't figured it out by now, I'm all about the word communities and ecosystems because I do believe in what we all do. So teaming up with Colin and Andrew here at Gradient, it seems like a logical fit to get the word out and help MSPs be better and navigate this crazy road, this crazy journey of being an MSP.
That's awesome. We'll hop to the right of the screen. Now we'll go to Mr. Dennis O'Connell, COO at Taylor Business Group. Say hi.
Hi, everyone. Colin, it's great to be here. I enjoy the heck out of you. I love the smiling faces. Everybody's got a smile on the picture. That's what it's about. We're all ready and energetic. You know, Ken's into the word community. I believe we're all into the into the word education. So hopefully this education will allow you. I mean, this talk will allow you to learn more about what we're trying to do. We're here to give back to the community. We want to see if everybody is, you know, we're lifting up the community and everybody will be better.
Awesome. And then we'll go to Mr. Andrew McKeage.
Yeah, so obviously Andrew McKeage, Director of Sales over at Gradient here. Super excited to be on this webinar. You know, we work pretty closely with the Taylor Business Group and obviously Dennis and Ken. You know, Gradient is all about an open ecosystem, and that really does kind of play itself into the whole community peer group. You know, it's a funny industry that we all work in, where as much as we can be seen as competitors, we're all pulling on the same side of the rope, and we realize that, you know, there are a lot of better together stories and that sort of thing. And I think that this is just a really good opportunity for everyone to kind of dive into that.
Absolutely. And I'm Colin Knox, CEO and co-founder of Gradient MSP. Like Ken, I ran an MSP for a lot longer between my own and the ones before that than I like to admit, but had an exit 7 years ago, actually this month.
Wow.
7 years ago this month. So yeah, all good. All's well that ends well, right? So, but a big part of building the MSP that I did, we grew it to about 4 million in revenue, and a big part was peer groups and having peers around us. So, you know, there's a lot of power to be had in peer groups like TBG. So let's step into some of this content here. You know, I think the ominous term peer group could mean so many different things to so many different people, and the perceptions and interpretations and everything of it. But at the end of the day, it's less about what it is and more about what the objective is of a peer group. So, you know, as two gentlemen that run peer groups and drive them and are big advocates for this, you know, how about you guys tell us, like, what is the main objective of a peer group that people should be looking for?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things, Colin, as you know. I mean, just think about the start of just peer group in general, right? It's getting in a group of peers, which means that, sure, we're all in the same business, but you may know something that I don't, and Andrew may know something different that we don't, and there may be some things we know, but it's that collaboration where we start to learn those new things that is just the initial piece of it, right? And, you know, from a Taylor perspective, we kind of take that in a different direction. As again, I think all peer groups are good. I think just being a part of a peer group is important. What separates what we do from maybe some of the others is we don't even call them peer groups. We call them business improvement groups because of the collaboration and the things that we bring into those meetings, right? And so, you know, things like, you know, the meetings that we have are creating that cohesion with the members. There's also accountability, something that we all know as business owners. Colin, can you remember running your business when you didn't have accountability? I mean,
Yep.
there was so many things that we thought we were doing right. And until someone says, hey man, that's not the right way to do it. And here's why.
Yep.
You don't ever get your stuff going straight. So having that accountability to me is huge. And then of course, just that ad hoc communication that's creating those relationships, sharing other relationships that we talked about. And of course, sharing intellectual property, right? Within that group, having that large degree of sharing those items like scripts and job descriptions and things like that, that you don't otherwise get unless you go to Google and search, or you go to Facebook and you type it in. And sure, there's some of those groups that are still really good, going to give you good information, but to get that deeper dive, you're not getting that unless you're in a real group with folks that you're seeing every single month and working on some of those same things, and you're driving down that same path, right?
Yeah, and to add on to that, Ken, I think when we all owned our own businesses, we learned early on there was just a couple of people to talk with. One was your spouse, and they're not in the business, and they're good listening, but they're not going to give you a whole lot of advice. And the second person was the guy in the mirror, and what I found was that he wasn't any smarter than I was, right? And he couldn't come up with any new ideas for me. And what we find is in the peer groups that everybody is doing something. We're all doing the same thing, but they're all doing it uniquely.
Right.
And there's an aha moment that comes almost in every meeting where somebody goes, "Oh, geez, I didn't even think of that." Somebody is well down the path, and they're doing well, and somebody, geez, I didn't even think of that. So it's that opportunity to be collaborative, and the other thing about it is that ultimately these people become friends. Right. And you start going on vacations together. So it becomes as much about the business as it is about the family. But what's very obvious in this community is your business is your family, right? Colin, how much of you think about it, how much of your net worth was tied up into your business,
Mm-hmm.
right? And, you wake up thinking about it, you go to bed thinking about it, you might even dream about it. And so having, being able to then extend that to your peers that are in your group and start going and do vacations together, it's really pretty phenomenal, I think.
Yeah. And take that a step further, Colin. We talked about this all the time is, we've seen peer groups where the people were so close that they ended up merging together. And it was a group of MSPs merged together. They already know each other really well. They know the accounting systems. They know their PSAs. They use the same PSA. And then all of a sudden, the best line I heard was, this deal wasn't done with a handshake. It was done with a hug, because they all were that close to each other. And it makes a huge difference because, Colin, have you ever been a part of a bad acquisition? I mean, it can be painful. So being closer and being able to get to know other MSPs in this way is better from that standpoint too, from the acquisition side of things as well.
Yeah. I can't say I've been a part of a bad acquisition, not because I'm not allowed to, but our acquisitions, I'm fortunate, touch wood, has all gone well. But yeah, there's so many horror stories. And, I think what a great way to kind of wrap up this chapter. Like, I love that you guys call them business improvement groups, because that should be the objective of the peer group, right? Is to improve your business. under whatever frame that is or means, right? Whether that's operating more effectively, operating more efficiently, whether that's being, more profitable, whatever that is, is to improve your business, which ultimately, hopefully, improves the value of your business and helps take you to the ultimate outcome that you're seeking. So, if that's the objective of a peer group, I know we kind of talked through some things, in a prep call for this about what are the types of things to look for in a peer group. So we talked about, one was the quality of the membership, right? And who all's in there. Oh, I'll back that up a little bit. But that's really a big piece of it, right? I mean, I know I've been part of peer groups where I was definitely the smallest and most inexperienced MSP in a peer group, and so I had a lot to gain from the people there. And then I've been in the peer groups where I was one of the larger or most effective and successful MSPs in the group. And that didn't necessarily mean that the other members of the group then weren't quality for me, because they all had something that they did or knew that was better than something that I was doing. And I think that's a very important piece.
Yeah, I agree. And that's exactly, Taylor pays attention to that as well. The groups are set up for everybody in the group to benefit, right? And that MSPs, and I'm not going to give exact sizes, this is a roundabout number, MSPs from that 1 to 2 million are very different than somebody who's 5 to 7 million. And they have different opinions, they have different ways of doing things. They're operationally, they're doing different things, right? There's a whole different subset of ways of doing business. So we try to make sure that the groups are matched up specifically by those types of things. They don't have competition in the room with them. That is something that's very important to them, even though I don't even call it competition anymore. I've been using the term co-opetition, right? I think that you should get to know everyone in your area so that you have a better understanding of who's there, and you never know who you could work with. But from a standpoint of the groups, we know they're sharing personal information and private information. So we do separate it by that. You're not in the same geo when you're in the group, and we do separate them by size and maturity so that they're still getting that different flavor, but they're not speaking a completely different language.
Yeah. Well, and I think an interesting thing is, as you said, size and maturity.
Right.
Because so many people think that big means you're at a high maturity level of an organization, and that's not always true.
No.
I've seen MSPs doing 20+ million in revenue that have a very immature operation that's not well put together and everything else, and they're doing a lot of revenue because they're really great at sales and they can keep the customers, but it's not an effective delivery. Whereas I've seen 2-person MSPs that have extremely high levels of maturity, automation is dialed in, all their processes, everything that way. So I'm going to unlock all of this information here on the screen, and then we can talk more about all of it. There we go. Yeah, so I mean, you look at these things, knowledge sharing, the accountability we've brought up, trust, the increased valuation of what it can do for your business. I mean, chime in here, guys. Like, what?
Yeah, well, I mean, increased valuation seems to be on front of mind for everybody now, because lately PE has been more involved with MSPs than we've ever seen, right? And you have to, first of all, if you're not in control of your books and your profitability, EBITDA, we know all the terms. If you're not in control of those things and don't understand it, not only will you maybe not get the increased valuation, right? What we all talk about, the multiples, right? Those high multiples. But if you're not educated enough on how this all works, you could get taken advantage of by some of these companies as well. So there's 2 sides to that. One of the things that we've seen this increased valuation through our groups. I won't have the exact number right, but it was roughly in the last 16 months, there was a large group of MSPs. Dennis, do you know the exact number? I know we had the number, but there was a large enough group of MSPs that required over $300 million in total. Obviously we can't share the direct numbers or any of that stuff, but you think over $300 million over the last 16 months of MSPs being acquired, that's pretty cool stuff. And it was at higher multiples because they had everything in order. So it's learning all of the ways to benchmark and get your books in order and lining things up properly is really important. And it's not something that we learned. I don't know about you, Colin, but I wasn't a financial guy coming into being an MSP. I was a tech. I like to fix stuff.
I think that's everybody. Everybody stumbles in. We're all these accidental entrepreneurs in the MSP realm, right? Nobody does it because it's like, I want to run and build a company. And it's like, man, why am I crawling under desks for $100 some bucks an hour for them to make that? And I'm getting paid that, like, I can do this, right? So you stumble into it. But, you know, you mentioned the thing about private equity coming in here. I mean, at the end of the day, most people want to have some sort of succession plan for their business. I'm not necessarily going to call it an exit plan. Right. And because you're not going to work forever, you're not going to own the company forever necessarily. And, you know, even if you do own it forever, you're not going to be working there forever. So having a level of diligence in how the business operates is prudent. But, you know, with private equity, I was speaking to a major advisor on MSP M&A. And he mentioned that there's something like 57 private equity groups out there currently looking to acquire an MSP platform.
Right.
Meaning that they're looking to buy one or some MSPs, bring them together as a platform to then fund for acquisitions of others. Well, there's a stat that only 20% of businesses that get a letter of intent for acquisition, those deals, only 20% of them close. And a lot of times, you think, oh, something wasn't right in the business or wasn't what they put it up to be. They just don't have everything in you know, a good structure in the business to be able to satisfy the diligence when it comes time. They can't prove their profitability because they haven't been tracking things properly. They can't prove the financial growth of the business. They can't, you know, a lot of those things, or they can't remove themselves from the business without it collapsing. And so, you know, a big piece of this is being able to gain that knowledge of how the business any business should be run, you know, how to structure it, how to run it, making sure that you do have that accountability that if it's not going right, that you can get that going.
Right. And that's a good point. And we talk about that journey. It's owner growth is what Taylor helps bring to the picture as well. It's taking an owner from that early stages of I do everything, I wear every hat, to becoming the CEO. Yeah. And we all know not everybody who owns a company can just become a CEO.
No, this is true. Andrew looked like he was trying to jump in there.
Just even to mention, you know, we talk about what you look for in a peer group. And I think, you know, for a lot of people outside looking in, if you've never been in a peer group and you've started your own business, most people stumble into that, not realizing how isolating being an entrepreneur can be, right? You are the be all end all for this entire business, and the stuff that you're worried about, the stuff that keeps you up at night, you don't necessarily want to share that with your team, which is your immediate feedback loop. So having a quality peer group, you know, you talked about it, Ken, perfectly, that you don't want all of the same size businesses, right? No team is made up of all quarterbacks, right? You might be a great marketing mind, and, you know, be able to share a ton of wealth of information with all of your peers, and they're going to help you fill in those knowledge gaps that you have, right? And all of that, you know, like you've got here, you know, accountability, trust, all of those things, are now able to have someone outside of your organization to keep yourselves accountable to each other, right? But without the trust, all of that can easily fall apart, right? And I think, Ken, I mean, this is going back years ago at an event that I remember you saying this, you know, having another business kind of in your area that you work closely with, it's probably one of the best assets that you can have, because if you do end up stumbling into that customer that is maybe just too big for you, or is just not a great fit for your business, right? Being able to still help them in a way that you can pass them off and have someone that you can share that kind of business sense with, and potentially pass a customer back and forth, that just goes to building your reputation, right? But you don't do that by yourself. You need to have groups. You need to have the place that you can go and, you know, spill your guts a little bit and say, hey, I'm falling apart in this aspect of my business, right? Has anyone done the same? And that's where a peer group really is able to step in and accelerate that growth of your business and lead to all of the quality outcomes that we all talk about right here.
Yeah, it's such a true statement, and I'm glad someone was listening to me back then. But
That's all I caught.
Yeah, exactly. Just that one piece. It was right before the next drink, right? I got you. Yeah, no, I mean, it was it's very important to stop that castle mentality where, oh my God, they're going to steal my secrets, right? And be that, start thinking about co-opetition, like I say. And when you start doing that, there's a whole slew of things that happen. First of all, that could be the company that you acquire, or it could be the company that acquires you, or it could be the company you merge with, or there's so many things you don't know about another business until you talk to them and learn about them and learn from them. It's just, you're missing the boat on a lot of those pieces. And I've definitely had that instance where I found a company that I could refer everything that was just smaller, because that's all they wanted. They didn't care about the big stuff. They didn't even care about the managed service stuff as we started to delve into managed services. So anything I had from that standpoint went to them. And then I started to find a really good fit for when I was going to fire customers. I didn't have to fire them so harsh anymore. I would actually go in and just say, look, we're going in two different directions. It's not you, it's me, kind of the George Costanza approach to breaking up. And then I would say, but I'm not leaving you hanging. I'm going to hand you over to this company, and they're going to be in good hands, and we're going to white glove you over to them. And it made us look that much more professional, because you know what happens. If I just say, hey, we're too good for you, we're not going to support you anymore, that company is going to trash you at every corner.
Yeah.
And so that's really where that all that kind of ties into it as well. There's so many other avenues that you can do to make yourself look much more professional. And when you're talking about community, you want everyone to think, hey, listen, we may not be a fit for everybody, but we're here for you all, and we're going to help.
I think the other thing we need to talk about here and touch on just real quickly is peer groups are not just for owners, right? There are peer groups that are associated with for service managers, for project managers.
Yep.
And what's so cool about these other groups is as a service manager, I'm stuck in a weird position too. I'm not an owner. I'm typically not an owner. I'm no longer one of the guys. Who do I talk to? It's got the same discussion challenges that an owner has. So you have the opportunity to share that way. It also shows that the owner is making an investment in you. So it builds you. You as the owner can build up your staff and help them feel involved and willing to move forward. And then so I think there's a huge amount of value when you're looking for something of how do I get the rest of my business involved.
And Dennis, a good point there that you just made too about those groups is one of the things that Taylor has is we have what happens in the group stays in the group mentality. So these service managers really can, chat with each other, but that's not being lifted up. So the CEOs and they're not diving into that. And it does make better for that relationship, because if they trust that, we're talking about trust here, right? If your team members trust that, they're going to be a little more open, right? We're going to learn a little bit more about them. The coaches in the room, the facilitators in the room will be able to open that up and help fix some problems that you don't need to have, as a CEO, you don't necessarily have to deal with. So doing that between those groups is really important. And we take trust really seriously at Taylor Business Group. So having those different groups, like Dennis said, we have a service manager group, we have a project manager group. We're now starting CAMs. Those groups are still what happens in the room stays in the room from a standpoint of, hey, I have all these issues, but I don't necessarily want to go back to my CEO with these issues type of thing, right? And as a CEO, you should welcome that, because you want them to have an open forum to discuss this stuff and get it out and be better.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, let's use the sports analogy. As the CEO or the owner, you're the head coach.
Yep.
Right. How are you coaching the coaches? Because I think we all need to have a little bit of, or enough of, humility in us to realize that we weren't all the most exceptional service managers, marketers, sales, every single role that's out there. And I know Andrew brought up like the quarterback and their, that analogy, but quarterback only runs the offense, right? You still have a whole defense. So it comes down to coaching the coaches. And that's not always by, as the CEO, you knowing everything about service management and service, delivery leadership and all of that, but it's providing mechanisms and resources for those people to be the most effective for you. And so that I think is huge.
Yeah, I agree. And then going back to this, the idea of these business improvement groups in general and peer groups in general, because of the network that we've built, we now have extra feet on the street across the country. So we talk about being in different geos. Well, the cool thing is someone in Boston could need feet on the street in LA, and they can just go right through the group and just say, hey, by the way, do we have somebody here? Or they might be in their group. You never know. But being able to have that network where you could reach out and say, hey, I need someone I can trust to get out and do this work for me.
Yeah.
That works. And then also just straight up referrals. Hey, I have a client that I just wouldn't work on. Do you guys want to take this on? And knowing that you can trust that, and that referral will look good back on you down the line, is another important piece of all that.
And I think the other thing that's important with peer groups too, and just to kind of wrap that up, anymore today, it's so easy to try and network online, right? And all we do is LinkedIn and people that we meet virtually and stuff like that. There is no substitute for the relationship that you'll build being at an event in person with someone, sitting in a room with them, being in the trenches and going out and, sharing a drink after all of that. All of those things, you build those different bonds where, you might have 2,000 followers on LinkedIn and a handful of close people that you'd be willing to open up and talk to, right? Yeah. That's not really a true network. A true network are the people that you can pick up the phone and, they'll be able to help you out and vice versa. And that's where you form those bonds.
Andrew, I wish we were in person right now, because I would just hug you. What Andrew just said is probably one of the most profound statements right now, because people are confusing online connections with real connections, and it's not the same. Also, companies are using that as a tactic, saying, oh, I got 40,000 followers and I'm going to get you. And then they act, when push comes to shove, 8 people may connect up and show up on that. So being in person is definitely one of the biggest pieces of this whole thing. Is being able to have that in-person piece just is so much more. There's so much more to that.
Well, and even when you're part of the peer group, you know so much more about their business, right? And this is a long challenge and struggle I've had with some of the online groups and forums and communities, is there's a wealth of engagement in there. And you can get a whole lot of support and encouragement, or vent about whatever. But when you put a question out there for advice, how should I deal with this customer? What should I be doing about this? Has anybody had that? You don't know who's giving you that advice, right?
Right.
You don't know if it's somebody that just set up their shop and they have all this great ideology about how business should run and how clients should be handled and everything else, or if they're at the helm of a $10 million MSP. And I've said this over, and even if they say they're at the helm of a 10 million, their screen name is something completely, unique and arbitrary, that you don't have any of that. So to be able to go and say, you know what, certain things I will take advice on from any size of MSP. And in fact, I want advice from some much smaller MSPs and certain things to remind me about how to simplify some of the things. And maybe I'm overthinking or overcomplicating something. And sometimes it's, if I need advice of how I get to that next level, I want it to come to somebody who's already at that level, and I know it's at that level. So I already advanced the screen, but I think this is a big one, right? And this was part of our conversation, the other week, is what you shouldn't expect from a peer group. And I've had these conversations all the time, because people come to booths that I'm at, or we'll talk about whatever at an event, and they'll start saying like, oh, I went and tried a peer group, but this happened. Well, you were maybe went in with a false pretense of what you were expecting out of it, or maybe you contributed the wrong thing into that, right? So, what should you not expect from a peer group?
Well, clearly, there's no silver bullets, right? That's been my line since the very beginning, separate from a peer group. You're not going to walk into a peer group and all your dreams are going to be answered. That's not how it works. You know, yeah, and there's certain things that you just can't expect to happen. We've said it from the very beginning, right? All good things require hard work. There's nothing comes easy, right?
Yeah.
We talk about change being hard and all this stuff, but also change brings good things. There's a lot of good that comes from change. So when you walk into a peer group, first of all, if you have certain expectations, you should discuss them with whatever company you're going to make sure of that, instead of signing up and then coming out saying, oh, they didn't, I needed to build my marketing team and they didn't do that. Right? You're not expecting, that's not what's going to happen. These actions aren't going to happen. What you can expect is to be challenged.
Yeah.
And to make change and things of that nature. I mean, Dennis, you know this, you've been doing this a long time from a standpoint of what you shouldn't expect from a peer group. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that you need to realize that the peer group is not going to do your work.
Yeah.
Right. You still have to do the work. Right. You should not also think that this is a retreat. Right. This isn't a social club. This is a business club where the people are looking to meet a goal, and it's typically growth, profitability, valuation, something. There's a goal there, and you need to do that. So you can't expect a free ride.
Yeah, and then of course, Dennis, because we know what we're talking about here from a standpoint of, it's not a place to go and gripe and complain. Now that's social media. That's where you do that. No.
Well, you're not going to get the pity party, right? Like,
right.
to both your guys' points already, this is a business focused group that's about improving and challenging people, right? So if you come in, they may say, yeah, that really sucks. You need to do something about it, right? Like, time to pick yourself up and go and take action, right? And to your point earlier, there's no silver bullet, right? Well, silver bullet would be an answer. And this is an advisory group. This is not an answer group, right? Like, they will give you options. They will give you advice. They will, make suggestions. None of that is the definitive answer for you. It's certain things that maybe have worked in other businesses and ideas and things to challenge you to think outside of what your current line of thinking is. But yeah, you can't go in just expecting pure pity, and you can't go in expecting all the answers to come for you.
Right. And the funny part about that too is again, it gets breaking away from that castle mentality and all that, you think it. It was when I realized, when someone finally kicked me in the pants and I realized I had to start listening to some different opinions and different, aspects of business. Boy, it was like a waterfall. It was amazing to not only pick up on all the different things, but also realize what works for Colin in Canada may not work for me in Boston, but some aspect of what Colin was talking to me about could work. I can apply some parts of what he was saying. And that's the bigger piece, is don't just look at it as, oh, Dennis's thing doesn't work for Andrew. No, how about what Dennis was saying applied in a different manner because you live in a different geo, or, you have different customers or whatever it is, different verticals. But think about how some of those ideas could apply if you just change them up to what you're doing too.
And I think one other thing that people need to realize is that if you're going to be successful, you have to be uncomfortable.
Yep.
And what I mean by uncomfortable is you need to be brave enough to ask Andrew that question when he's talking about something and you want to call BS on him, right? If you stay quiet, then you're not helping Andrew. And, if I'm talking and Colin calls BS on me, I have to be able to sit and listen and think about it and be able to move forward. So there is that that need around those areas.
Yeah. So maybe you just shouldn't always expect, unconditional affirmation of what you're thinking or saying or doing, right?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
go in expecting it to be uncomfortable, because that's where the growth comes from. And I think that's actually probably what discourages a lot of people, or that they don't like about some peer groups, is they go in expecting to feel good about themselves. They go in expecting everything to be good. And that's why a lot of people started businesses, is they didn't want to be held accountable by other people. They didn't want other people telling them what to do. They didn't want other people telling them where they're not doing good in their job. But that's also, in a lot of cases, why their business maybe isn't doing spectacularly, right?
Right.
So to be able to go in and realize that, hey, for me to grow this, for me to do better with this, I need people to be evaluating how I'm performing or the decisions I'm making.
How do you fix something if you don't measure it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have to find a way to measure it. You have to get in and actually see how does a doctor fix your problem without diagnosing it? It's the same thing. If you don't bring the problems to the forefront so they can be diagnosed, you can't be fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one final point on this is that most people think that they have to have it figured out before they join.
No, that's the whole
And
point.
they think that everybody that's in the group has it figured out. Well, nobody has it figured out. So when you go in, don't expect everybody in the peer group to have it figured out. When's the best time to join a peer group? When you don't have it figured out, because they're going to help.
Absolutely. That's, what, like, to me, that's the exact same thing as people that wait to join a gym until they're in better shape. I don't want to go and be the fattest guy at the gym. I don't want to go and be lifting the lightest weights. I don't want to go and. So what are you going to do to lose that weight and get stronger so that you could go to the gym to do it? Like, that's where you go, is you go to the gym to do that stuff.
I didn't think you were going to drag me into this, but you did. All right.
This was for me. This was for me. Right. But it's the thing, right? Is always putting off until you're good enough for the show. But that's not how you get good enough for the show. Right. Is showing up and starting when you're, needing the most help, when you're the furthest away from the ideal, position that you're looking to be in. All right, yep. Where does this take next? Oh, yes. So what's stopping you from getting started? What stops most of these MSPs, right? Let's handle some of this objection to, that whole thing. Maybe that's part of it, right? I want to be in better shape. My business be in better shape before I come in. What are some of these things? And we listed out some of them to guide the conversation here, but competitiveness, fear, and time are the biggest things that people are saying all the time. Right.
We kind of segued into here pretty nicely too, Colin.
We actually did for once. Look at that.
We talked about the castle mentality. That's that competitive piece of it, right? The fear of showing them their what's going wrong, or like the gym, fear of showing people that you're not ready to start working out yet, so you're never going to get there. And then time. Well, and I think time is the funniest one, or the most interesting one, because we always talk about being in the weeds, right? Colin, you know this from being an MSP. We're always in the weeds. Well, the only way you can get out of the weeds is to actually figure out what those weeds are and how to navigate the weeds so that you're now able to cut that down and get in your business, as we talk about, the cliche, right? Work on your business, not in your business. And that's the piece that I think stops a lot of people. Well, I don't even have time for this call. So how am I going to, make time for these things? Well, until you do, you're not going to be able to delegate. You're not going to be able to move down that road. Like we talked about, the journey of being the one man wearing all the hats, or one person wearing all the hats, going up to being CEO.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen unless you find that time.
The trickiest thing with the time is that, it's really easy to forget how crippling 6 months of inaction in your business can be. And like you said, you're working in the business and not on the business. Well, where do you find the ways to improve your efficiencies? Where do you find the ways to do that? You have to make the time for that. And a peer group, again, it's the accountability. You're
Right.
going to have these things that you have to
Yeah.
do, that you put some commitment behind. And it's great to be able to remove yourself from that equation at times, right? Pull yourself out of the business and try and look at it objectively. Like we just, we hammered home, a peer group is not going to be your cheerleading squad, right?
Right.
They're going to challenge you. They're going to get in there and start to dig into the painful areas of your business with you, but that's how you fix it. Right. That's where you really need to make sure that you make the time for it, because the fear, competitiveness, all the other stuff, those are superficial. Time is a real problem that people can say and always use as an excuse. Right. So until you make that conscious effort, it's always going to be a big blocker for you. But, understanding what you're going to get out of taking that time away from what you think is important right now is super critical.
Right. 100%. I mean, listen, if you're in the same place you were last year, do you want to keep doing that? Then fine, keep blaming time.
Yeah.
But if you want to fix that, there has to be a starting point. You have to make that first step. And, peer groups, Taylor, for instance, we have a whole onboarding process. We don't just slap you into a group and say, okay, good luck. It's an onboarding process. We get to know who you are, what you do, who you serve, and where you want to go. And that's how it ties out your roadmap, right? That's how you're going to know where you are now and how you're going to get to that next level. And again, it's not easy. It's painful. It's painful. And the longer you wait, the more painful it gets, right? And then, we talk about fear and competitiveness kind of tie in together, right? Because I'm afraid to show some of what my books look like because I haven't done them. I haven't had anybody on them. So they're really behind and they're messy. Well, they're going to stay behind and messy unless you get some help. And we help with that. We actually have folks that can help get your bookkeeping in order so that you can line up and become compliant with our systems and get to the benchmarking mark that you need to be at, so then we can map your progress. So it's all in this vicious loop of, if you don't get started, you'll never get there. And I don't think anybody started a business to say, hey, I just want to be at the same level where I'm pulling my hair out every day for the next 10 years. No one ever goes into it thinking that. They all do this. Yeah. We mostly do the same thing
anymore, Ken.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Colin's already pulled it all out. All right, your beard here. But no, seriously, you don't go into it for that. Everybody always goes into it thinking the same thing. Hey, I'm going to make some money here, right? The end goal is to make money. We want to serve and we want to do all these things. But the end result is you have to be able to pay yourself. You have to be able to take care of your family. You want your employees to be paid. And the only way to do that is to get some order in that chaos that is most MSPs. And we know this.
I think, we've talked a lot about competitiveness and the fear and stuff over this webinar so far. And time is the one that really sticks out to me. And people are always saying, I don't have time, or they're very stringent with where they give what they give their time to. What's interesting is that on average, if you spend focus for 1 hour on something, you can gain back at least 10 hours on a recurring basis by focusing that 1 hour on something. Right? Everybody's so busy running around trying to do this and all haphazard over the place. But the reality is 1 hour spent can save you 10 on a recurring basis, right? 1 hour of focusing and recruiting an employee or an administrator or an outsourced group for whatever can save you 10 hours doing certain tasks on the regular. 1 hour looking at evaluating a piece of software, trialing it and setting it up can save you 10 plus hours on the regular, right? This is the same thing. And your time is like any other capital you have, that when you invest it, you need to expect an ROI on that. But it's not invest and boom, you get an ROI immediately, right? Like, it's not like we're all investing in Zoom in, late 2020, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, I just 10x my money. Awesome. Good timing, right? That doesn't happen. You make an investment, you hold it for 2, 3, 5 years, and that's when it really starts to pay dividends for you. And so you need to have that patience on the investment of it, but you can invest in it. You can find time.
Right.
Yeah.
Some obvious areas where people say, well, I don't have an hour a month, or I don't have time for a 2-day meeting. but there's very obvious examples of where you get time back. For example, somebody is looking into some new piece of software, maybe this company called Gradient MSP, right? And they ask their peer group members, and two of them say, I love it.
Yeah.
Right. How much time did I just save and having to evaluate that product? I went from doing all my research to this to, you know, Ken, your peer says, oh, call Colin, here's his email, here's his phone number. He'll get you set up, and you're set up in 2 weeks as opposed to 3-6 months down the road.
Yeah.
And you know, there's the reverse example of that where, you know, somebody says, hey, I'm looking at this other product, and they go, ooh, run as far and as fast away as you can, right? And the money you save and the time. And then there's another example is, I need to hire a service manager for the first time. Anybody have a job description for a service manager? Yeah, all of a sudden you got 6, right?
What to look for in a service manager?
Right. What tests you might want to give them,
Yeah.
you know, what does their disc profile look like if you're a disc person? You know, we're going to go hire them. Hey, I want to hire some people from overseas. What's the process? Where do I go? You know, remember all these types of things. It is the amount of time you can save is it. I think that's the big payoff is
Yeah.
you get so much more time back.
I
Yeah,
think-
and just, I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the vendor one's a really big one, Dennis, and you know, we're all guilty of the same thing, because whether you're a vendor or you're an MSP, we're all trying to sell our services, but we all suffer from that exact same frustration. And if your inbox looks anything like mine, you're getting, you know, 15, 20, 30 emails a day that tend to all sound the same about this new service that's going to revolutionize your business. Well, how do you cut through the noise? How do you actually find out what's worth your time? And a peer group's a great way to do that, right? You know exactly if you're facing a problem in your business that you think that there's a tool out there that can solve it, there's a very slim chance you're the first one facing that problem, right?
Okay.
Yep, 100%. And just from a standpoint, and I would just say, I just call Colin. Anyway, we have the other piece of this is that I was thinking about all this. For me, coming to Taylor was actually that journey for me to Taylor was all based on real world incidents that happened between the MSPs and Taylor that got me to Taylor in the first place, because of my network of people I speak with and all the groups that I've been a part of and all of that. And everybody kept coming to me, Ken, you got to check out Taylor. Like, and then they start to tell me what Taylor's doing for them. And so from a standpoint of that, I just want to give some of those real world type of things. You know, a couple of the people came to me and told me about hey, listen, I got acquired. And man, what a difference it made than the first time when I was looking at trying to get acquired to now.
Yeah.
You know, my multiple was unbelievable. The numbers were great. Everything was clean because of what Taylor did for me. And then even some of the smaller MSPs that I deal with were reaching out to me and saying, hey, 3 years I've been with Taylor Business Group. I lost my best person and he was stealing business from me. And even through that event, my net operating margin went up year over year significantly. And because it's benchmarked and he can see this, and by the way, he was losing customers during this period, but because he had all the efficiencies, the benchmarks and everything put in place, he was still succeeding. And he could see where losing those customers was hurting, but he also could find a way to bring back those numbers and keep that margin up. So from that, just to give some perspective to, oh, I'm afraid to do this, or I can't find the time. These people found the time and their businesses got better. And that's what allured me to Taylor Business Group. I truly feel like there was something special here. And that's where business improvement groups tie into this so well. And this conversation is important. And listen, there's a lot of good peer groups out there. Check them all out, see what works for you. All we can talk about is the differences for what we do here, the things that we tie into from a standpoint of calling it a business improvement group.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that, but this is all really good stuff and you got to get started.
I think that's the perfect segue into the last slide, right? Is when the best time to get started is it's now. When's the best time to do anything? It is now, right?
Right.
If you've been thinking about this, if you registered for this webinar, if you showed up for this webinar, if you're watching the recording after, it's because you've been thinking about this and you just wanted to evaluate and think about it and do, what should you look for, right? There's that famous quote of when was the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the next best time to plant a tree? Now, right? That's always the case. There's never going to be a great time to do anything new, right? And there's always an excuse of why not to do something. But this is one of those things of planting a seed now, so that in the next 2-3 years, you're way further ahead than you would have been on your own. Or sitting 2 to 3 years from now saying, I really should have done that before. Or maybe now you're having that thought, oh, I thought about this 2 to 3 years ago. Gee, where would I be today if I had done that? So, I think it prime time is now to do anything.
It is now. And I would say, start now, get onboarded, have your first meeting, and then come to our annual meeting that we have in August, which Gradient will be at, and come take a look. We have our big event in August. That's one of the big meetings. That's the big meeting spot for our events. This really isn't rocket science. You do have to get started and you have to get a plan in place. And the only way to do it is to start having the conversation. Reach out to our team. We'll have the conversation with you all and talk about this. And if you all know me or you don't know me or you haven't learned by now, I'm not a sales guy. I'm just really passionate about what we do, our community. I've never been a sales guy. I started as a tech and I just love what we do. I love what Gradient does. And by the way, that didn't just happen because Colin and Andrew and I have been friends for years. Colin came to a Taylor Business Group, one of our events, and Colin and Andrew presented, and I learned more in that presentation than I knew before that. And I already knew these guys. So when they actually showed the members what they do, that's really where I learned a whole bunch about what they do and how they help our community. So for me, it's all about community and in our ecosystem and how things are evolving and how we want to make things better. Rising tides raise all ships. That's the motto. And the only way you do that is to get started. So, come check us out, have a conversation with the folks at Taylor. We'll definitely help you understand it. And by the way, if it's not a fit, I'll tell you. I'm not trying to bring people in. I don't want to bring people in that it's not a fit for. I'll let you know if it's not a fit and I'll tell you where to go. We really just want to make sure we're helping people and getting them in the right path.
Awesome. Well, guys, this has been a great conversation. I've learned more about it. I think I've always had a positive outlook on peer groups because I've seen what it's done for my businesses over the years. But yeah, this is awesome. We've recorded this. We'll be sharing it out everywhere. And yeah, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, looking
Thanks
forward
for
to
having
it.
us, Colin and Andrew. It's been a pleasure.
Yep.
Love
Love
that.
seeing you guys. See you soon.
Awesome.
Right.
Well, with that, we'll wrap up and say thanks to everybody.
All right, bye.
Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
thanks, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Cheers.